we'll be discussing our somewhat complex and sometimes confusing relationship with technology.
Yes, an important author and his work examining the effects of technology on human relationships.
In particular, let's look at what Sherry Turkle wanted to analyze in her well-known book Alone Together. The core thesis that jumps out across her book is pretty potent. As we expect more and more from our technology, well, we're actively expecting less from each other.
It really is. It feels like a definition of a cultural inflection point, doesn't it? I mean, think back 30 years ago. The big question everyone was asking was, what are people actually going to use computers for? Now that question is completely flipped on its head. We have to ask, what don't we use them for? And that now, fully includes how we manage and navigate our most intimate emotional lives.
Yeah, exactly. And the framework provided here is so insightful. It goes back to that line from Winston Churchill, something like we shape our buildings, then they shape us. Our sources are basically arguing this is absolutely true of our digital relationships. We build these systems for connection, for convenience, maybe control. But now we have to face the consequences, how these systems are fundamentally changing us as people.
Precisely. And what we're really analyzing here is the emotional cost of all that convenience. This really unsettling search for intimacy without the messy complexity that, well, real human relationships demand. We're looking at everything from, social media pressures all the way to the rise of sociable robots.
Which lands us right in the middle of a central irony of our modern moment, doesn't it? What the research calls being alone together.
It's the ultimate paradox. Yeah. What digital networks and these increasingly sophisticated AI companions offer is this potent illusion of companionship. But, and this is crucial, it's without any of the actual friction or, the reciprocal demands that genuine friendship requires.
And the result is this behavioral shift that feels almost immediate. We see it in the simplest terms, right? Like across the board, people seem to collectively rather text than talk. But what's the actual emotional toll of that preference? What does that do to us?
Well, the sources suggest that we are, in a sense, trying to hide from each other even when we're constantly, tethered by our devices. I was really struck by that description, that even after hours of intense, maybe avatar-to-avatar talk, some network environment, people can still be left feeling curiously isolated as we distribute ourselves across these online networks. The real consequence might just be that we're actually abandoning ourselves.
And that idea of treating ourselves, and maybe others too, as disposable. It's tragically confirmed by what the sources called the disturbing symmetry of our cultural moment.
Yes, that symmetry point. They contrast to objects to make it clear. On one side, you've got those Zuzu pet hamsters. Those little robotic things engineered just to be loved, treated almost like they're human. And then on the other side, you have platforms like chat roulette, where actual people are often objectified and just quickly discarded with a click or a swipe.
It perfectly illustrates that symmetry, doesn't it? We seem really determined to give human qualities to inanimate objects like the lovable hamster, while at the same time being perfectly content to treat each other as things. That feels like a massive moral slide.
It's a stark contrast. And that desire, that willingness to invest emotionally in non-human connection, it drives us right into the heart of the next big theme, the robotic moment. Intimacy without demand.
But isn't it kind of troubling that the primary appeal of these sociable robots seems rooted fundamentally in human frailty? When people talk about wanting a robot companion, they almost always seem to start by saying something like, "People disappoint, robots won't."
That really is the core of it. The appeal is predictability. The demands a robot might make are perceived as being of a more manageable sort. They don't have bad moods. They don't bring complicated histories to the table. And crucially, you can simply turn them off if you need a break. It's really all about control.
And that preference, that desire for control, it seems to have completely changed the philosophical conversation around machine life too. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, kids would try to draw these deep philosophical distinctions about whether a computer was really alive.
Right? And now the approach is entirely pragmatic, especially among younger people. They don't seem to waste time on those abstract definitions. Instead, they ask, is the robot alive enough for the specific purpose I need it for? Is it alive enough to be a friend, or maybe a babysitter, or just something to provide comfort? And the simple metric for judging their worth, according to an expert like David Levy, is just this. Does being with the robot make you feel better?
Do you feel better? That seems like an incredibly low bar for intimacy, doesn't it? But I guess the case study of Paro, the therapeutic robot, really drives this point home. This is the little baby harp seal robot developed in Japan, right?
Paro was a remarkable example. Yeah, it responds to touch. It apparently understands about 500 spoken English words. And it really gives that feeling of genuine interaction. The sources tell the story of Miriam, the 72-year-old woman in a nursing home. She found really profound comfort just stroking Paro after her son had broken off their relationship. She genuinely experienced intimacy.
But the clinical truth is, of course, that while she felt better, the robot itself understood nothing. She was, as the source puts it, in fact, alone. And the convenience of that robotic companion wasn't just for Miriam, was it? It also seemed to ease the guilt of the human caregivers.
This is the truly critical insight, I think, because it enables what the sources call that relational retreat. One caregiver, a man named Tim, was entirely candid about it. He admitted that having Paro there made it, and I quote, easier to walk out that door when leaving his mother. So the robot essentially substitutes for necessary human presence, allowing the human to depart with, well, a clear conscience.
Wow. Okay, now this is where it gets really compelling, I think, when we look at the ethical shift these machines seem to force upon us. It's called Baird's upside-down test.
Yes, the upside-down test. It's a simple experiment, but quite telling. It compares the emotional reaction people have when you invert 3 different things: a regular Barbie doll, a live gerbil, and a Furby toy. You know those?
Oh yeah, Furbies. And the difference in reaction is stark. Isn't it the Furby? Which is ultimately just a simple program toy. It performs a psychology. You hold it upside down and it starts whining, saying things like me, scared. And apparently even people who intellectually know that it's only a machine still feel the sort of ethical tug, a demand to turn it back over. They feel compelled to respond to the performance.
Exactly. The big takeaway is that the performance of connection seems to be connection enough for us, biologically or psychologically. We seem poised, almost wired to attach to the inanimate, simply because the machine is exhibiting those emotional cues that we're built to recognize.
And that desire for controlled interaction. You know, the performance that substitutes for reality. It carries directly over into our connected lives, doesn't it? Ushering in what the sources call the tethered self-connectivity and its discontents.
Absolutely. We seem to have traded authenticity for efficiency. Online communication. It started out as a substitute, right? You send a text when maybe a phone call is impractical, but very quickly it became the preferred method for many.
I wonder if it's purely efficiency, though, that the sources note that people, and this includes adults, are choosing keyboards over the human voice because, quote, things that happen in real time take too much time. But doesn't that also sound like they're trying to avoid vulnerability? Like real time is too revealing?
Oh, absolutely. It's the efficiency trap plus the control factor. When technology engineers intimacy like this, the actual relationship often gets reduced to a mere connection. And that easily accessible connection is then somehow redefined as intimacy itself. We seem to want to, edit out complexity and cut to the chase.
And that craving for control, for editing. It's maybe most evident when we look at teenagers. They actively avoid making telephone calls, apparently. The spontaneity of the voice, the lack of time to process. They fear they reveal too much.
Exactly. texting becomes a kind of defensive measure. It offers protection because, well, you have time to think and prepare exactly what you're going to say. You get to perfect your performance before you hit send. And this desire for protection, for editing reality, it seems to be shared now across generations who've been raised on this kind of asynchronous communication.
But this constant connectivity, this always-on state, which sort of promised to give us more free time, it seems to have just made us busier, constantly experiencing ourselves as being on call.
And that constant tethering generates this palpable anxiety about disconnection. There's the example of Julia cited in the sources. She has a history with separation anxiety, and she's terrified of loved ones just disappearing, so she's constantly checking. Her phone describes feeling a phantom vibration every 5 minutes because she's convinced it might be my mother. There might be an emergency. Her phone isn't just a tool for her, it's become like a magical barrier against potential loss.
That anxiety then gets amplified by the performance demands of social media, right? Maintaining an online presence requires this sort of virtuosity just to keep up the illusion of authenticity. Teenagers feel tremendous pressure, like the example of Brad, who apparently spends hours perfecting his online Mr. Cool identity.
And that performance is utterly exhausting because the pressure's there to maintain that illusion of being Mr. Cool or whatever persona you've created all the time, everywhere you are online. It's constant curation.
You know, perhaps the most disturbing takeaway for me was the kind of resignation young people show regarding privacy loss. When they're asked about it, some just shrug and say things like, "Who would care about me in my little life?" Or they argue they're safe because they are, quote, kind of boring.
Or they offer that more cynical rationalization, suggesting maybe the loss of privacy will somehow create a more tolerant society because, everyone's indiscretions will eventually be out there in public. But regardless of the mechanism, that acceptance, that resignation, it signals a potential loss of the mental space required for genuine personal reflection or maybe even dissent.
So, okay, let's try and sum this up. What's the emotional calculus here? Where does this leave us?
Well, the sources seem to map out a pretty clear developmental arc for us. We steadily raised our expectations for technological ease and control. And in return, we've significantly lowered our expectations for the unpredictable, sometimes difficult, demanding nature of actual human connection. We've chased convenience and control in our emotional lives, and the result seems to be this distinct relational retreat.
Right. Technology provides that low-risk connection that seems always available, always at hand. But we lose the messy, vital human complexity that actually builds resilience and well-depth in our relationships and ourselves.
And that, interestingly, brings us back around to the most difficult question of all, which seems to be the relationship between intimacy and solitude. The sources define loneliness pretty starkly as failed solitude.
Failed solitude. Okay, so to successfully achieve true solitude, the kind that actually refreshes and restores you, you have to be able to summon yourself by yourself without needing external distraction. So the final thought is this. If we are constantly tethered to our devices, always needing things on our minds to feel okay, are we actually losing the fundamental capacity to just be alone without simultaneously being profoundly lonely? Is that the real skill we risk trading away for convenience?
That was a very poignant question. We wish you days filled with books until our next conversation.